Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 4. So this is going to be my review for Episode 4, otherwise entitled Elongated Journey into Night. But obviously before we go ahead, there will be spoilers in this video because we're going to be talking about the major talking points from this episode. So if you have not watched the episode, go do that, then come back to this video later on. So really last episode really just set up this whole bus metahuman thing. And as I said in my review last week, I actually wasn't expecting them to reveal so much last episode, but they did. They gave us more Thinker, they gave us the source for all these new metahumans, and really just set up what Team Flash is going to be doing for at least most of this season leading up to the end of it. Now, one of the new characters we were meeting this episode, a lot of you guys would know this from promotional material, was Breacher, who is Gypsy's father from Earth 19, and I must say he is the ultimate mood killer because Cisco is about to get lucky there, and he just stormed him. He's lucky that he's scary, otherwise Cisco, you know, even though Cisco can seem like a bit of a coward sometimes, I think in that moment he might have been a bit more angry than we usually see him. Now, Maher Bellows was back in this episode, and he was actually a big part, but we'll talk about why he was such a big part later on, but he's only appeared a couple of times. The only time I can actually remember him being on the show was in episode 1 of season 2, when they had that Flash Day thing. I'm pretty sure he's been in more episodes, but that's the only one I can pinpoint that he was in. But he was also a detective or a cop in the 1990s Flash show. So this is what the CW Flash show of modern day does. They bring back characters from the 90s show, like we've had obviously John Wesley Shipp, who was the Flash in that show, is Jay Garrick, or was Henry Allen, and then we've had like Amanda Pays or whatever her name is, who played Tina McGee, even like the Flashpoint like chief of police was from the Flash show as well, Mark Hamill, obviously, different things like that. And this is another case of them, you know, bringing back someone from the 1990s show to appear in the modern day Flash show, which is always cool. Now, I guess one of the big reveals in this episode was that the driver of the metahuman bus actually died and he was drowned. So they just sort of set that up. I'm assuming they're going to go deeper into that in the next couple of episodes. But this is like the whole like tissue, or the connective tissue, or the bridge to get to Ralph Dibny, who is another new character we meet in this episode, who we'll talk about in a second. But that really does cancel out a lot of theories, or it might not cancel them out, but it does make you like reconsider them, because a lot of people thought that Clifford DeVoe, or the Thinker, was the driver of the metahuman bus. Now, I'm assuming the metahuman bus driver was killed maybe because he's maybe not using them for malicious intentions, if that makes sense. Like maybe he wasn't a bad person, so that's maybe why he was killed. But I'm hoping and assuming that we find out more in episodes to come about why he was killed, and if any other metahumans on that bus will be killed as well. Now, one of the funnier parts in this episode was definitely when Breacher was in Star Labs, and obviously Cisco had, you know, just pretended that Barry was his assistant, like Cisco is running everything in there, so I thought that was a funny scene. Just seeing Danny Trejo just running amok in Star Labs, I thought was funny. And I did find it funny that they also poked fun at his scariness, like how scary he is when Caitlin comes in, like, oh, why is like the scariest looking person I've ever seen roaming our halls? I thought that was funny. Now, as I did say, we do meet another new character in this episode in the form of Ralph Dibny, who will be much more you know, consistent, or much more popping up in this season, if that's the right way to put it, than Breacher, because he's going to essentially be a new team member, of Team Flash. But that whole like introduction to him stretching was pretty gross, like especially when he like starts like slowly dripping down the building, his legs slowly start stretching, and then it just all flops down to the ground in front of him. I thought that was hilarious and pretty gross at the same time. And even in Star Labs, when like he's like sneezing and his face gets all stretched and like everyone's discovering all these different powers of his. Pretty gross, but pretty awesome at the same time. As I did say, the Breacher scene in Star Labs I thought was one of my favourite scenes, but then the Breacher and Cisco scene in Jitters, I think might have taken the cake. I don't know, they're both pretty funny, but like Breacher just really threatening Cisco, and Cisco just thinking that's all a game. And Breacher's, you know, being 100% serious. I don't think he's a dude that would joke around too much, though that was a pretty funny scene. Now, going into this episode, if you'd kept up with like some of the promotional material regarding this season and like Ralph Dibny in particular, you would have known that Ralph and Barry were nemesis. Like, well, Ralph was Barry's nemesis from back in the day. They didn't really specify when, but we find out it was when Barry was actually like a rookie and like a junior CSI. Like it was his first big case, or maybe his first case in general. And essentially Ralph had planted evidence to just get the case over and done with, because they couldn't prove that this husband had killed his wife. So Ralph planted evidence because he felt that the person was, you know, guilty. But because Barry knew that this evidence wasn't legitimate, he actually called Ralph out for it and actually got Ralph, fired from the Central City Police Department, which basically ruined Ralph's life. Now, I'm wondering if anyone else caught the machete reference when Cisco was like planning his fight against Breacher when he was talking to Harry Wells. He was pulling all these different things out and he actually pulls out a machete and Harry goes like, oh, too much, and he chucks the machete away. If you don't know that, it's because if you don't know what I'm talking about, then why it's a good reference. Danny Trejo is, well, one of his most famous roles is in the role of Machete. 2 films and even in Spy Kids, his character was Machete. I think it's the same character. It's like set in the same universe, I think, which is weird to say. Now, the whole reason that Ralph was like basically, getting, attacked was because he was actually blackmailing the mayor. Now, he was the mayor, was the one who had hired the goons earlier, so this is why the mayor was so involved in this episode, which I thought was pretty surprising. But as you usually would expect from a private investigator, he had some photos on the mayor of the mayor cheating on his wife. So you can understand why the mayor was very keen and very determined to get those photos back. Now, one thing I thought was pretty random, I understand why they did it. It was a more comedic effect, but we find out that Breacher ends up going after Ralph because he's actually, how Ralph can stretch. We find out earlier that Breacher's planet had been attacked by this race from another Earth. They didn't specify at that time, but we find out that this race is plastoid. They can stretch, so he thinks that Ralph is one of these plastoids. But I think that whole scene was essentially just to push Cisco in front of Breacher and make him realize that Cisco isn't like a wimp. He's brave and he will protect the people that he cares about. So I think that's more what that scene was going for, but also like a comedic sense as well. Now, I know a lot of people will get annoyed by the scene I'm about to talk about, but they sort of had to do it. Like if it was anyone else, then I can understand why people might get annoyed about it. But in this case, we knew that Ralph would eventually be joining Star Labs, or at least working with Team Flash in some capacity. So when Barry revealed his identity, I was like, well, okay. It was sort of, you knew that was going to happen, just because it would be weird if Ralph was going back and forth to Star Labs and didn't realize that Barry was the Flash. So you have to understand why Barry revealed his identity again to another character, but I know some people might get annoyed by that. But that whole scene was pretty cool when Ralph stretched his arm, flung his arm as far as he could to grab onto the helicopter. The one thing that didn't make too much sense to me is how the helicopter just sort of cocked there. I don't know if they really explained too much about it. Ralph's got all this strength as well. They might explain that in the next couple of episodes, but Ralph didn't even budge at all. It was almost like he grabbed onto nothing. It's almost like he grabbed onto a bird rather than a helicopter flying as fast as it was. So that was a bit weird, but when Barry ran up his arm, it was pretty cool. And then Joe he just casually reveals the baby news just to Barry, oh, Cecile's pregnant, just out of the blue, while he was trying to avoid that the whole episode. So I thought that was pretty funny. Now, it doesn't come as too much of a surprise that Breacher still hates Cisco, even though Cisco was pretty impressive this episode in regards to what he did to impress Breacher. But I thought it was pretty funny when we find out the names of Gypsy. Her name is Cynthia. That's her name from the comics. Gypsy is Cynthia Morrison or something like that. Her last name starts with an M, and then Breacher is just Josh. I thought that was funny. So I wonder if the next time we see both of them, if Cisco is going to refer to them as Cynthia and Josh, because they were getting annoyed then. So I don't know, Cisco might want to try and not annoy them as much, and maybe just use that when he knows it's a safe time to use it. Now, the last 2 scenes of this episode do set up some stuff for the future, basically next episode and the episodes to follow. The Caitlin one is specifically for next episode, because next episode is basically a Killer Frost episode. We're going to get some Killer Frost flashbacks and learn what Caitlin was doing after she left Team Flash towards the end of Season 3 and before she came back in Episode 1 of Season 4. So that's going to be very interesting, and yeah, I think Caitlin might be in a bit of a tense situation next week. And then we also see Barry inviting Ralph to Team Flash, which, as I said, inevitable. We knew that was coming. But one thing that wasn't really expected, and it sort of got me pretty excited, was when Ralph actually drops the name DeVoe to Barry. So, and then just triggers Barry's mind into flashbacks from last season where we had Abracadabra mention DeVoe, and then also Savitar Barry mentioned DeVoe. So this is going to be very interesting in regards to them moving forward, because Barry knows, oh, these people were mentioned, this person was mentioned last season, so he's going to have to start doing research on DeVoe, and then I think all these dots are going to start getting connected leading up to the mid-season finale, and then the episodes to follow after that. So this season is taking shape, we're meeting some new characters, getting the main story sort of spread out pretty well, so I think it's going pretty well, and I actually enjoyed this episode for the most part. But yeah, overall this episode was pretty good for the most part, as I just said. The Breacher stuff was awesome, meeting Ralph was good, but no, I don't think you could really judge Ralph just based on this episode, because you were really seeing Ralph in this perspective of Barry for the most part, except towards the end. So I think in the episodes to come, we'll learn more about Ralph and the actual type of person he is, because I think, you know, him getting let off the Central City Police Force did sort of ruin him a bit and put him in a darker hole. So I think in the episodes to come, might I say, we'll learn more about Ralph and who he truly is. But meeting Breacher this episode was fun. I don't know when we're next seeing Breacher, let alone Gypsy. I don't think they're planned for anything before the mid-season finale, so it might be in the back half of the season we meet them next, which I assume we will. But if we do meet them, that would be pretty cool. And I think if we get to go to Earth 19 and see what they have to deal with over there, that would be pretty cool as well. And one thing I actually really haven't mentioned this episode, but I do want to mention that was very impressive, was actually the visual effects of like Ralph's powers, or the elongated man's powers. I thought they were really well done. It was one thing I was actually sort of worried going into this episode, but I think the way they're going to do it, you sort of got to tease it at the end of the episode when Barry shakes Ralph's hand. You don't actually see Ralph on screen when Barry's shaking his hand, so that makes it a bit easier to do. So I think that's what they're going to do most of the part. Like if there's more detailed stuff that, like, you know, Ralph's stretched limbs are going to do, you won't actually see Ralph in the same shot. It'll be like off screen that Ralph is and you just see his hand or his foot or something like that. But I think the hardest thing they're going to have to deal with when it comes to VFX will be when he stretches his head and stuff like that. I think that's going to be the hardest stuff, and it could be some of the things we don't see too often. I might only see him stretching his head a couple of times this season. But thanks for watching, guys. If you did enjoy the video, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on the video just to, you know, support the video and support the channel as a whole. Let me know in the comment section down below what was your favorite part of the episode, what didn't you like too much, and just any opinions you have on it, just leave them all in the comments. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.